All right, we're back. Part 2 of this amazing conversation with Phil Gwoke. Before you listen to this, please listen to part 1. It's got all the context. And also, if you would like a similar conversation, head over to our other platform, More in Common, where we demonstrate compassionate conversation. We had an amazing conversation with filmmaker Ogi, Ogi the Yogi, as she calls herself. And it gets into some of these similar topics of generations and undoing generational trauma. So do those things, jump into this, and we'll see you soon.
It's funny as you frame those two examples, just to put the bias check meter in play. As you talk about the millennial example, I'm like, yeah, for sure. Like, ask why. That makes sense. Why jump? I'm not, just conforming. Like, let's impact this business and let's do it together. And then you say the Gen Z, how? My instinct is to say, figure it out.
Yeah.
Why are you asking me how? I can't babysit you. I can't hold your hand, right?
We've got the X and the millennial in us.
Yeah,
We're like, you figure it out.
We had a tangible example of that. I'm so glad that resonated with you. A few years ago, we had some Gen Z interns in our firm, BridgeWorks. We teach on this stuff, mind you. But at the time, a majority of the folks in our organization were millennials. We had every generation represented, but we had a strong core of millennials. And I remember the millennials so excited to have these Gen Z interns that they could mold and shape and give them this great experience. And one of the tasks, simple task, but my millennial colleagues asked our Gen Z interns to coordinate a team meeting. It was like an all-day event. And every step of the process, the Gen Z interns came back and said, well, what time should we have lunch? What should we order for lunch? What type of theme would you like to see? How long should we play this game? And just question after question. And my millennials were getting more and more frustrated because they were saying, we have given you everything we ever wanted. We gave you money and we gave you free reign to do it however you wanted to. And their thought was, if I would have wanted you to do it the way I would do it, I would have done it myself. I want you to show me how give me another path, do it however you want to. And that the Gen Z folks were saying, I don't want to make a mistake. I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to do this wrong. Show me how you want me to do it. And so even within our organization, we were seeing that tension come to the front. And it was just another illustration of what you just described, Keith. Like, man, I don't want to babysit you. And we experienced it.
That just woke up so many things. I mean, I watched tons of YouTube tutorials for all kinds of things.
Yeah.
We had a producer, our first producer. He would say, just make a video. Like, if you want me to do this, or if you want somebody you're gonna hire to do this, just make a video. And it never dawned on me that I like YouTube. YouTube is his, that was made for him. That's what he knows. And so to speak his language, it's like a little tutorial. It's like, hey, and when planning lunch for this event, you may want to think of these things and keep these in mind and do this. And they'll be like, boom, got it. Now we know what to do.
See, and you raised a good point there, Rodney, that I don't know a generation right now that doesn't use YouTube. I love YouTube. My mother, who's 74, watches YouTube videos. But there's a difference between all generations using it and the generation who's experiencing it in their formative years, and it's shaping their learning style and how they expect life to happen. I don't expect it. I love it, but I don't need that as my learning tool. Whereas many young people, it's programming their expectations, and that's what generational theory comes back to. Like I said, those formative year experiences that are unique to that one generation.
Man, this is very interesting. So we got almost got like a COVID generation happening right now.
Yeah.
Oh, let's go. Sorry.
No, I want to take a pivot on this specifically to address it for the audience watching it. And how do you teach a Gen Zer to have independent thought, because you want to gain their thinking to help advance the organization? Maybe they have a different perspective, by coaching them how and at the same time drawing their best out.
As a profoundly important question. I would start with the foundation of this is when we approach these topics, we start with this premise that no generation lives in a vacuum, and that the healthiest communities are a fusion of all four predominantly living generations that are influencing the culture. And when I say four, I'm saying that on purpose. There are people alive today that are post Gen Z. They call them Gen Alpha. Again, don't get caught up in the names. That doesn't matter. These names will change in time. And there's people that were pre-boomers, but they're at another stage in life, but they're not the predominant influencers. We're talking about these main four. And the healthiest communities have all four generations shaping them. So it's important to know that we need each other. Each generation brings something valuable to the table. So now, if I want to try to coach another generation, I first have to demonstrate, and Rodney, you alluded to this earlier, that I've got to be open to their perspective is good. I gotta figure out what's going to make them feel valued and safe and so forth. And then once I'm speaking their language, now try to say, but I've also have some experience, right? The example of playing baseball. There's a reason, the best hitter was fourth, because it's not like it never worked, but maybe there's
Yeah.
a fusion that comes to both working together for the greater good of the whole. So there is a little bit of that. Where's that middle road? Um, but when it comes to, and we could play this at either end of the spectrum. So whether it's a Gen Zer that you're trying to foster some independent thought in them, or some courage to come up with an idea that they weren't coached on, figure out, all right, what's another value that this person has? Okay, well, we know Gen Z is growing up in an environment where social justice is such an important part of their experience in a way that no living generation has really had to this degree in their
Yeah.
formative years. So this is really important to you, but to say, hey, I don't have your perspective. I need you to help me. Bring some of your thought, because I don't come from your experience. I need you, if that's really important to you, I need you to coach me on some of these things. Now you're speaking their language, you're inviting them to share their thought. But it might take a little extra courage for them to be willing to speak out on something in an environment where they feel like, wow, these people have a different perspective than I do, and I'm not sure that I'm ready to do that. So you might have to give them a little bit of your permission, if you will, to step outside of their comfort zone. And so there's a lot of both end that has to take place. It's a long answer to an important and difficult question, but one that when we answer correctly, now you're inviting the best of every generation to contribute to an environment.
The last one of these we did was with Beth Yonder, and she focuses on communication. And this is really about speaking in some kind of a joint language, or in a language that the person that you want to receive the instruction or the whatever. So if you create your own, and this has been big in the corporate space for a while, and I don't know if everybody knew why, but creating tutorials or creating standard operating procedures that weren't written down in a Word document, but were delivered in a tutorial-like fashion. And in that, I think you could be explicit. I mean, it's more about the method of communication, not what's being said, because you can say in that, bring yourself to this. Like, if you see something that's wrong or different, like, feel free to inject yourself. It's not that they're not willing to do that. It's more that they want to understand your parameters and the parameters of the thing they're given in a format that they're used to seeing, so that they can then go do.
We work with an organization, a theme park, and I'll leave their name out of the conversation, but a nationwide theme park, global, I think, and they hire predominantly Gen Z people, and they were getting a lot of applications, but when it came time for the interview, they weren't showing up in ways that they hadn't seen with previous generations when they hired millennials 10, 15 years ago. And so they were trying to figure out what to do. So we talked about creating an environment that built their courage. So then they developed a program where you could submit your first interview via video. so the young people could edit their video, get it just right, submit it, then essentially the park would look at it and say, hey, we loved your video. It was great to see you. Will you come in for an interview? We want to get to know you more. It built their confidence so that then more they started showing up more often because like, okay, they like me. In other words, they swiped right already. Yes, it's a match.
Right.
They like me.
Right.
Now I can go in for the video. I feel more confident. So I like what you said, creating a place where, okay, let me submit this in a way that I'm comfortable sharing.
So kind of flipping from the millennial or the Z on the younger side and going to the older generations in an organization, how do we, those of us that care about this, how do we ensure that they don't feel forgotten, ignored, or even targeted in some instances?
Right. Well, we've certainly come through the last couple of years this phenomenon called the OK Boomer movement, if you will, where all of a sudden you have a group of people just being dismissed for one reason or another. And there's some important reasons to understand there where what shaped it. But Harvard Business Review came out with an article. I want to say it's maybe 4 or 5 years old now, but it was really enlightening for me because it was how do you engage your most seasoned professionals, and what they identified in the article and the study that they did was that you get to a certain point where technology is changing so much, the culture is changing so much, where everything that you thought you knew about your organization feels unfamiliar and you just want to leave. And what they suggested was creating, recognizing that there is still great value here with those folks. And we want to get them into their sweet spot, performing, using the tools that they're most comfortable with, delivering responsibilities that they're again, most familiar with, and it's going to create further engagement. I want to point a study out that I came across a little while ago, and it said in 1950, the average age of someone entering a nursing home was 65 years old. In 2018, the average age of someone entering a nursing home was 81 years old. So we've gotten
Wow.
conditioned to think that because you're 65, you're ready to slow down. That's no longer the case. People are living longer, eating healthier, taking care of themselves. They have a lot to offer, but we, again, as a society, have been locked into a paradigm that says, well, these people are ready to be done. Many times they're not. And so they've got great things to offer, but much like we would try to adapt to an incoming new generation, how do we, in a sense, adapt, see the value, and make sure that our seasoned professionals are in their sweet spot, offering the benefit of their wisdom and experience and perspective that is so important to help us be successful.
When you think about inclusive leadership, and I want to be the most inclusive leader that I can be, how would I apply some of what we just talked about, what we opened with in generational theory? What's something I could do to start applying into my leadership style to help me be that inclusive leader that I want to be?
All right. To do that, I'm just going to quickly break down, 3 words: diversity, inclusion, equity. Right? We see that show up in this topic all the time, and I think words have meaning. It's important to understand what do we mean by these things when we discuss them. And so I'm not saying these are the definitions of each of these words, but to frame our inclusive leadership mindset, I simply look at diversity as a unique set of experiences that shape a different perspective. So when I think about any time I've ever applied for a position or tried to grow in my career, I usually talk about my experiences because people like experiences. When we encounter diversity, sometimes we think, diversity of generations or diversity of race or gender, whatever, well, there's going to be a problem here. But not if I look at it as a unique set of experiences, because I want someone to tell me about their experiences. Do you climb Mount Everest? Tell me about that. That adds value to my organization. So I really frame diversity as these unique experiences they have from a generational standpoint or any others. Inclusion is really important. Inclusivity is important to see it as it's not something I offer somebody else. And I had a friend of mine change my whole thought process on this, African American woman in her 60s, and she said, "Phil, I don't like inclusion." And I thought to myself, well, what do you mean? I mean, isn't that important? She said, "I don't want to feel like I was included as some charity case. I want to know that I'm valued and people want me a part of their organization. So I look at inclusion as something that happens within inside of you, the person. You have to say, okay, this is a unique experience, and that experience is going to add value. So when I really start to develop inclusive leaders, I'm really focusing on the mind and the heart of that person to see that difference as something that could bring some value to the table, a different perspective that I hadn't thought of, that I couldn't possibly have thought of because I've never had their experience. But with their experience, I'm only going to become that much better. When we start talking equity, now these are the strategies that you can begin to offer to make, create belonging, create allyship, and a host of other important experiences that people are looking for when they join your organization or stay within your organization. So in other words, you genuinely believe that they're valuable. Now what are you going to begin to adapt to make sure that they feel it, that they experience it? And like to the point of my friend, the African American woman that I referenced earlier, she's looking for that. She's looking for someone to say, okay, I believe you value me, and now you're asking me to share or creating an environment where my contribution really does matter here. So there's kind of a quick framework for how we try to develop that within people, but we see it when it shifts from a problem to an opportunity to grow personally and make our organization better. It becomes far more appetizing, far more something people want to engage in.
Amazing. Thank you. No, that's goodness. And before we wrap, for all the people that are listening to you speak and interested in getting in touch with you, possibly bringing you out to consult their organizations or them personally, where can they find you?
Handful of spots. We've been doing this a while, so we do have the claim to fame. We own the URL generations or HTML generations.com. You can also find us at bridgeworks.com. You can find me at Phil Gwoke on my LinkedIn profile. So, or just Google Phil Gwoke or BridgeWorks or Generations. We'll be at all three of those spots.